And you know I'm going to ask you all these detailed questions, so get ready.
I'm ready. Fire away.
Pat O'Connor defeats the Sheik via disqualification before the bell rang.
Before the announcer, who was me, even did anything. He attacked the Sheik. First of all, there was a political deal, of course, to bring the Sheik in because of what was happening in Detroit and the problems between the Bruiser and the Sheik and Sam still trying to keep peace in some form.
Was it to show support for an NWA member?
As much as anything, yeah, because he belonged to the NWA, and the Sheik wasn't his cup of tea, Sam's cup of tea.
Okay.
But he brought him in, and O'Connor said, I can remember O'Connor telling Sam, it'll be okay, we'll just get a DQ and it'll be all right, and Sam taking that at his word. He didn't know, number one, that the Sheik would come with his manager at the time, Eddie Creechman.
Oh, boy.
Which right away ticked Sam off. And number two, he didn't know how the DQ was coming. And I got a feeling O'Connor didn't even know himself until that night when they actually put the finish in, and probably the Sheik said, well, let's do this, because he came from the mentality that creating a riot or a near riot would help sell tickets. Sam sees things like that happening, and he is having heart attacks, saying, I have people with families here. I have the guy from the Post-Dispatch. I have a guy who owns a furniture store here with his family. They see a riot coming. You know what? They don't come back. So the Sheik, on the way to the ring, the Sheik attacks Pat O'Connor in the aisle just before it gets to the ring. I'm standing in there. Nothing's happened. Creechman comes in. He jumps on the apron. He's marching up and down the apron all around the ring. I'm standing there with my thumb in my ear. Haven't done a thing. The Sheik's all over O'Connor outside the ring. He pulls O'Connor's jacket off. He's strangling him with the jacket. I can still remember looking out and seeing him having his jacket around Pat's throat and wrapping that around the ring post. Crowd's going nuts. They've never seen anything like this.
Are they into it?
Oh, they are bad into it.
So
throwing beginning. There are cups beginning to be thrown. There are people beginning to storm the ring to protect O'Connor because of what has happened. And we had probably a dozen off-duty police officers all the time, and usually four to six would be assigned to the ring in some form. The others would be scattered around the building. We had all 12 at ringside to keep people from the ring. Creechman's going nuts. They're running this thing through. O'Connor never gets in the ring. The referee finally comes to me as they get things relatively calmed down. He says, you know what this is? This is a disqualification, right? I announce, without announcing the match, that it's a disqualification. The Sheik has been disqualified. The people are not in a good mood. It is bad heat, and there is a difference between good heat and bad heat. This was the kind of heat, maybe we could have drawn some people with the Sheik and putting him in, not with a Pat O'Connor, but with somebody else, where there'd have been blood and guts and no finish. We would have killed our town for 6 months. Sam knew it, and, well, that was the end of the Sheik. He did come back from one of the...
Whoa, wait.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Don't get ahead of the story.
Don't get ahead of the story, but basically, Sam was not a happy camper.
So the match is taking place, and where's Sam during this?
He's up on the stage, because this match came on right before the intermission. And usually by the intermission, you've got your house. You know what you've drawn. And that's when Sam would try to get over to the box office, which was on the outer aisles, one of the outer segments of the Kiel Auditorium walkway, for lack of a better term. So he's up there watching it, and I think he wanted to watch it just to see what would happen with the Sheik. Well, maybe he's wrong. Let's give him a chance. And I'm not looking at Sam up there because I'm realizing what's happening in the ring. By that point, when I see what's happening, I'm trying to get over by a corner. Because, for one thing, there's a bunch of stuff being thrown. I'm thinking, Larry don't want to be killed. And if things get any worse, Larry's going to bail out of this ring, and he's going to be underneath the ring. And now, of course, the Sheik and Creechman, they think this is wonderful. O'Connor has just gone along with the program. And our cops do not think this is wonderful. And I think we had 3 or 4 arrests that night. And that wasn't, that was our fault. We created a horrible situation.
So at what point did you first see Sam after this match?
That night? I even saw him after the show. Let me think. Because after the show, I was so busy. Sam didn't come back to the office. He would go out and eat. And usually he'd try to sneak out like during the last match.
Right.
So he'd beat the crowd a little bit. But not much. He liked to hear the crowd reaction. He wanted to hear people saying, was it good, was it bad, I liked it, I didn't like it. He wanted to hear that. He wanted to, I don't know if hear it's the right word, but to feel it. He wanted to feel the crowd reaction. My first real reaction that I can specifically recall would have been that Saturday when I stopped by the office. And I remember sitting with him alone. O'Connor was gone, and Sam telling me that will never happen here in St. Louis again. And he's giving me a lesson. This is one of those, your teacher calling you in and explaining, these are the kind of things that kills towns. These are the kind of things that give wrestling a horrible reputation. These are the kind of reasons why in most towns they can't go to the newspaper like we can. This will never happen here again, and I told O'Connor that.
Wow.
Not in those specific words. I mean, it's been 35 years. But I know the memory is very clear that it was clear to me that would never happen again.
Did the Sheik get to pull the pencil out, or was that still yet to come before?
You know, I seem to recall that he had something in his hand. But for one thing, and here's another thing when you think about it from just a standpoint of getting things over. I think he did have either a pencil or maybe had a cup or something in his hand. But none of this is in the ring. They're all around the sides of the ring. How many people could really see that? Because you had a crowd that was, and remember back then you didn't have security barricades. You had little ropes around the ring that could have easily been run over. The only thing that probably saved us from a complete meltdown, a complete riot. And we had one other situation a couple years later, but that was a little bit different in that from a finish involving Race and Valentine. This was totally different, and we had created this situation. The only thing that saved us was so many of our regular fans, our season ticket customers, they are all first, second, third row. I think they almost served as a barrier, not intentionally, but because they were in the way of people who maybe had bought cheaper seats or who had, who were not regular, who just for whatever reason were there for wrestling for something different, trying to charge that ring and kept them from getting to the ring. But of course, on the other hand, they didn't have to get in. As I think back on it, they didn't have to get in the ring. I really didn't have to worry because all the action was happening outside. If they wanted anything, there was a Sheik outside. That's who they wanted. And Creechman really never went in the ring. He's always around the apron, working that apron, stomping and raising his hand. And I'm thinking, well, I can't say that on the line. But I know what I was thinking. I'm thinking, you're going to get us all killed, brother.
Were you in the locker room at all that night with the Sheik, or were you just out at the ring? You didn't see him?
I never saw the Sheik after the show, and because, I had other work to do. I got to get up to the box office during the intermission. I got to make sure the results are called into the Globe Democrat and the Post-Dispatch. Now I got to make a decision as I call the Globe, because depending upon, it's a morning paper, depending upon the deadline, will the main event get in?
Yeah.
How much do I tell them about this fiasco? Because that could end up being 3 or 4 paragraphs on page 3 or page 4 of the sports. And basically I said I downplayed it. Shame on me, so much for journalistic accuracy, that the Sheik attacked Pat O'Connor on the way to the ring. He was disqualified, and it was a very rowdy scene. Luckily, I had somebody, whoever was taking it that night, didn't ask for much. And as everything worked out time-wise, because that was such a short scenario when it came down to you had probably, if you timed it, I'll bet the whole thing wasn't more than 5 minutes.
Now, do you think you guys kind of exaggerated because you're St. Louis, or was it really something that was bad for St. Louis?
It was bad for St. Louis. It was exaggerated because it was in St. Louis, and St. Louis had never dealt with that before, had never seen that before. And believe me, I've talked to enough some old timers in wrestling, and you still hear it even now and then, sometimes on the independent circuit. Hey, I know I can create a riot for you. Pardon me? I'm not looking for a riot here, but there are those who think that's good, and they were at many times serious promoters of serious places. And some of it came out of the Tennessees, and some of it came out of the South. Hey, we can create a riot here, and that'll get some heat, and we'll really draw the next show. And then they'd look at the next show, and their house was cut in half, and they'd wonder why. It's because Gary was there with his 4-year-old son, and people were throwing things, and the first thing you thought of, my kid's going to get trampled, he's going to break his neck. And you thought, I really
want to pay money to be in the middle of a riot, right?
Well, and then now there may have been some people who did. Hey, they went from there to Tavern on Friday night, and they had a fight at 2 o'clock. I don't know. And maybe for them it was cool. But for the casual audience, the audience that came 4 times a year, 2 times a year, 6 times a year, that was not what they wanted. That was not good entertainment. That was not, and you can say, well, wrestling isn't real. Well, buddy, for a while they want to look at it like it's real, and that in their mind was not real athleticism. That was not, at least, a pseudo sport of some kind. It was as I think back on it, that was a tough night. Hayes and Dory Jr. go in there, and I can still remember that. They had a decent match. They 2 out of 3 falls, and Jr. wins it clean. Keeps